The Red Keep was unusually silent, the air thick with tension and heat. Courtiers clung to their silks and secrets as word spread that Lord Eddard Stark, the North's unshakable warden, would address the court at midday. No one knew why, but Varys smiled that knowing smile. Littlefinger leaned in, sniffing trouble like perfume, and Queen Cersei's lips were pressed into a line so sharp it could have drawn blood. Ned stood in front of the Iron Throne. He wasn't armored, but he didn't need steel to seem dangerous. His voice was steady, grim, and in it carried generations of northern honor and stubbornness. "My lords and ladies," he began, eyes flicking across a sea of masks hiding fear and ambition. "We've buried King Robert. May the gods keep him. And now we look to the future of the realm." All seemed routine until he said the next line. "Prince Joffrey is not the rightful heir." The silence that followed wasn't just stunned, it was terrified. One woman fainted. A knight coughed hard enough to choke. Even the birds outside the high windows stopped singing, as if afraid to be heard. Cersei rose like a serpent disturbed. "Lord Stark," she hissed, "you dare speak treason?" But Ned was past fear, past hesitation. He had done what he had done because it was right. He held up Robert's final decree, naming him protector of the realm until the true heir took the throne. And then, with solemnity, he uttered the secret that had tortured him since Jon Arryn's death. Joffrey Baratheon is no true-born son of King Robert. He is the product of incest, born of Queen Cersei and her brother, Jaime Lannister. The rightful heir to the Iron Throne is Lord Stannis Baratheon. You could hear hearts break, minds race, swords shift in sheaths. It was no longer a game, it was war declared with words. Chaos erupted. Cersei screamed, ordering the Kingsguard to seize him. Sir Meryn Trant stepped forward, but Sir Barristan Selmy, face carved in stone, blocked his path. "Until a proper trial, I will not see a lord of the realm murdered in cold blood," he said. Joffrey stood, voice cracking with the rage of a boy trying to be a man. "I am the king, take his head." But the court was no longer united in fear. Many lords whispered. Some stepped back, and for a brief moment it looked like the truth might split the throne in two. Ned turned to Petyr Baelish, his last gamble, the man he had once trusted. "Now, Lord Baelish, now is the time." But Littlefinger smiled that oily smile. "You should never have trusted me," he said, sliding a dagger to Ned's throat. Yet unlike in the original timeline, Ned grabbed Littlefinger's wrist, twisted, hard, and brought the dagger down into his arm. "Not this time," he muttered, eyes like ice. "You fooled me once." Blood sprayed, screams rang out, the guards were split. Some moved to protect Ned, others to kill him. Swords clashed. Lannister gold faced off against Stark steel. Arya, hiding high above in the rafters, saw her father fight, not just with his blade, but with truth. And as the chaos swirled, one thing became certain: the game had changed. The Great Hall had become a battlefield of chaos and blood, a place where words once ruled now drowned in the clash of steel. Eddard Stark moved like a man possessed, not out of rage or desperation, but duty, cold, unwavering duty. He'd always been a man of honor, but in this moment he was something more dangerous, a man who had nothing left to lose but the truth. Sir Barristan fought by his side, sword glinting in defiance against the gold-clad Lannister guards. Ned's northern retainers, few in number but loyal to the bone, closed in to form a shield wall around him. Janos Slynt, ever the coward, slipped away through a side door, his loyalty crumbling like wet parchment the moment things turned against the Lannisters. Queen Cersei had vanished in the initial confusion, flanked by Sir Meryn and her personal guards, screaming for reinforcements. Joffrey was dragged away like a panicked child, shrieking empty commands that were buried under the sound of steel. "Secure the throne room!" Ned shouted to Sir Barristan, as two of his men hauled the wounded Littlefinger toward a pillar like a sack of lies. The court had scattered, lords and ladies tripping over gowns and greed alike. Suddenly, footsteps thundered from the far end of the hall. Lannister soldiers, dozens of them streaming in like a golden tide. And at the center of them, cold and composed as death, stood Tywin Lannister's youngest son, Tyrion. He had returned from the Vale early, warned by rumors of Robert's death and the brewing storm in King's Landing. Unlike the others, Tyrion didn't draw a sword. He simply watched with wide, calculating eyes as the hall burned with betrayal. "Ned Stark!" Tyrion called out over the chaos, his voice cutting through like a bell. "You've made quite the mess." Ned kept his sword raised but did not advance. "This is no mess, Lannister. This is justice." Tyrion gave a small, ironic bow. "Justice? Yes, though it seems justice in King's Landing comes with casualties." Barristan pulled Ned aside briefly. "We cannot hold this room for long. The Lannisters control the city watch. They will surround the Red Keep before the hour ends." Ned's mind raced. He had played his hand and survived, barely. But the longer he stayed in King's Landing, the more certain his death became. He had to make a move now, or lose everything. "I need to speak with Renly," he said sharply. "If Stannis won't come to the capital, Renly's influence might still sway the tide." "You'll never reach him if you stay here," Barristan said. "We'll hold them as long as we can. Go." But Ned hesitated. "My daughters—" "I'll see to them," Barristan promised, though even he didn't know if he could. "But if you die here, there will be no north to return to." Ned knew he was right. He looked back once more at the Iron Throne, dark, sharp, menacing. The very seat that had poisoned so many good men turned brothers into enemies, kings into monsters. He turned and fled through the back corridors, hidden tunnels once used by Targaryen royalty. Arya watched him from above, eyes wide. She didn't cry. She followed, silent and swift, a shadow born of smoke and blood. Meanwhile, Tyrion walked the ruined hall, hands behind his back, stepping over corpses. He stared at the Iron Throne for a long time. "Even truth has a price," he muttered, and Ned Stark just raised it. The city was changing. Whispers would become weapons. Allegiances would crumble like old stone. The North would hear of this. So would Stannis. War was no longer looming. It had already begun. The sun over King's Landing was no longer golden. It was red, stained with the blood of what had happened inside the Red Keep. Whispers spread through the city like wildfire. Ned Stark challenged the boy king, said he was born of incest, called for Stannis to take the throne. Some said Stark was dead, others swore he had escaped with the help of the King's Guard, but everyone knew one thing: the realm was broken. Outside the city, the streets buzzed with unease. The gold cloaks doubled their presence. Doors stayed shut, merchants packed up early. People could feel it, the calm before something terrible, and in the shadows the whispers grew teeth. In a dim chamber deep beneath the keep, Queen Cersei paced like a caged lioness. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with rage. Jaime had not yet returned from the Riverlands. Tywin was too far to act quickly, and Joffrey was a boy rattling a sword too heavy for his soul. "He humiliated us," she hissed, smashing a goblet against the stone wall, "in front of the entire court." Maester Pycelle sat, stiffly, eyes glassy. "The people, they are confused, Your Grace. They do not know who to believe, but they are afraid. That makes them manageable." "Afraid?" she snapped. "Afraid doesn't win wars. Afraid doesn't hold a crown. I want heads, Maester. I want every man who dared stand with Stark hanged in the square by nightfall." "And if the North rises?" Pycelle croaked. "If Winterfell sends its banners south?" Cersei paused, the fire behind her eyes burning hotter than wildfire. "Then we burn Winterfell to the ground." In the Tower of the Hand, Varys stood, quietly in the corner, his expression unreadable. And what of the girls, Sansa and Arya? Sansa had been found and taken, sobbing, confused, begging for her father's release. She didn't know he'd escaped. Cersei saw her now as both pawn and weapon. Arya, on the other hand, had vanished, like a ghost. "Find the little one," Cersei growled. "Dead or alive, preferably dead." Far beyond the castle, Eddard and Arya moved through the streets under cloak and shadow. Arya had found him through instinct, like wolves drawn to the scent of blood. They didn't speak much. Ned was wounded, shoulder grazed, ribs bruised, but he pressed on. Every minute in King's Landing was a minute borrowed from death. They made their way to the docks, hoping to buy passage on a ship bound for Dragonstone. Stannis would be there, the only Baratheon with a true claim. Ned still believed in law, in truth. If he could reach Stannis, perhaps they could rally the realm before Cersei twisted the story into something unrecognizable. But the city had changed. Faces looked twice at every stranger. Gold cloaks stopped carts without reason, and among the shadows walked spies, Varys's little birds, Littlefinger's broken men, and Cersei's knives. Ned and Arya reached the river gate just before dusk. He paid an old smuggler with the last of his coin and a name, Davos Seaworth. The man's eyes narrowed at the mention, but he nodded. "You'll have safe passage," he said, "but not through the usual way." As they boarded a small boat to sneak along the shoreline, Arya looked back at the city, the red keep rising like a wound against the horizon. "Will we ever come back?" she asked. Ned didn't answer right away. His eyes were on the waves, the wind, and the fires flickering behind them. "If we do," he finally said, "we'll come back with an army." At Dragonstone, Stannis had already heard the rumors. His jaw clenched, his fists curled. Finally, the lie had been dragged into the light, and for the first time in his grim life, he felt something close to hope. Eddard Stark was coming, and with him, the North, the truth and the first true spark of rebellion. The shores of Dragonstone were cold, wind-battered and cruel. Black waves crashed against jagged rocks like drums calling to war. Here stood Stannis Baratheon, Lord of Dragonstone, second son of Steffon, and, if the gods had any honor, the rightful king of Westeros. He stood on the battlements, face carved. From stone, watching the sea for a sign, then came the boat. Small, swift, and burdened with more than just passengers, it carried secrets, blood, and war. When Eddard Stark stepped onto the wet sand, his gait stiff and his cloak heavy with salt, Stannis didn't rush to greet him. He waited, as he always did, and when they stood face to face, silence ruled between them. Arya lingered a step behind, watching both men with suspicion in her young eyes. "You should be dead," Stannis finally said. "I will be," Ned replied, "if you don't act soon." They went inside, to the stone halls that echoed like tombs. Melisandre watched from the shadows, eyes glowing like embers, lips murmuring, prayers in a tongue no man understood. Arya stayed close to her father, staring uneasily at the Red Woman, unsure if she was a witch or something worse. Ned laid it out plain, as he always did. "Joffrey is not Robert's son. He is the child of incest. Your brother's true-born children are dead. You are the heir." Stannis nodded once. "I know." That answer chilled Ned more than the wind ever could. "Then why haven't you acted?" Stannis's lips twitched, not quite a sneer. "Because truth without power is still death, Lord Stark, and I have had too little of both." But Ned didn't travel across a kingdom, wounded and hunted just to hear cowardice. "Then gather your fleet, call your banners, march on King's Landing. The realm needs you." Stannis looked toward Melisandre. Her silence was permission enough. "I will call my banners, But I will not go to war for the gods of the north. When I march, it will be under the banner of fire and justice. The Lord of Light has shown me things, shadows in the flames, a stag pierced by a golden lion, a direwolf howling in the snow. The realm is bleeding, and I am the only one who can stop it. Ned's mouth tightened. He didn't like it. He didn't trust magic or red gods or shadowy priests, but he trusted truth. And for now, Stannis held that truth in his clenched fists. A raven was sent to Winterfell, to Riverrun, to the Eyrie. Letters inked with cold resolve and hotter promises. Joffrey is a bastard. Stannis is the rightful king. Eddard Stark stands with him. In the north, Robb Stark held the letter, in shaking hands. He had not heard from his father since the chaos in King's Landing. Rumors swirled that he'd been executed, but now this. His father lived, and he called the North to war. Robb did not wait. He summoned the bannermen of the North, the Karstarks, the Manderleys, the Umbers, the Boltons, not for Joffrey, not even for the Iron Throne, but for Ned Stark. "The North remembers," Great-Jon Umber bellowed, "and the North rides for war." Meanwhile, in the capital, Cersei spun lies like silk. "The traitor Stark tried to murder the king," she said to the lords. "He conspired with Stannis to seize the throne." She paraded Sansa through, caught like a broken doll, her tears used as proof of Stark's betrayal. She sent out orders, bounties on Eddard's head, executions of any bannerman who spoke for the Baratheon usurper. But behind closed doors, even her allies began to question. Varys whispered to the right ears, Littlefinger plotted double crosses within double crosses, and Tyrion, ever the realist, began drawing up escape plans and funeral speeches. The game had changed. No longer a fight between houses, it had become something worse, a fight between truth and survival. Stannis began assembling his fleet. Eddard healed slowly but prepared himself for war. Arya trained with one of Stannis' soldiers by day and listened to tales of fire gods and burning swords by night. She didn't understand much of it, but she did understand this. They had to win. Because if they didn't, her sister would, and die a prisoner. Her father would be hunted to the ends of the earth, and the lion would rule forever. The storm rolled over Dragonstone like a prophecy, lightning cleaving the skies, waves hammering the cliffs, and thunder howling like a god's fury. But even that chaos was nothing compared to what brewed across Westeros. The ravens had done their work. The truth had wings now. In the north, Robb Stark had taken the field, a boy in years, but a wolf in spirit. He rode with his father's bannermen, 30,000 strong, banners flapping like the ghosts of old kings. The war cry was not Baratheon. It was not even Stark. It was justice, and Robb swore it. "We march not just for thrones or crowns. We march for my father's truth." In the Riverlands, House Tully bent the knee to Stannis's claim. Lord Hoster Tully had no love for Lannisters, and his daughter Catelyn, heartbroken, proud, fierce, rallied her kin. She had once begged Ned to play the game softly. Now she sharpened the edges of it with grief, but not all were eager. In the Vale, Lysa Arryn clutched her son and refused every call to arms. "Let them kill each other," she hissed. "We are safe here." Yet the knights of the Vale stirred. Some whispered that Lysa was mad. Others recalled the last words of Jon Arryn, whispered on his deathbed, "The seed is strong." In the Stormlands, Renly Baratheon had crowned himself king, a younger brother with charm, smiles, and friends. He had no claim, yet he had men. And in this war, men often mattered more than blood. Stannis snarled when he heard, "Traitor!" He ground his teeth like stone. "The throne belongs to me, and I will burn all pretenders to ash." Eddard was slower to judge. "He's your brother," he said. "He is a thief," Stannis replied, "and thieves lose hands." Back in King's Landing, Queen Cersei ruled from the Iron Throne in all but name. Joffrey sat beside her, a crown too large atop his golden head. He had learned nothing. He ordered executions of Stannis' ravens. He tore down Baratheon banners. He had Sansa paraded in silence, pale, trembling, her blue eyes empty of hope. But not everyone was blind. Even Tyrion began to wonder. Alone in his chambers, he studied Ned Stark's last letters, copied secretly by a scribe who couldn't stomach the Queen's orders. "What if he's right?" he whispered. Varys only blinked. "Then the war will be longer, bloodier, but it will be true." And blood was coming. Ships filled Dragonstone's harbour, sleek vessels painted with flaming hearts. Stannis' soldiers stood ready, thousands of disciplined men sworn to his banner. Among them marched knights from the Reach who had lost sons to Lannister blades, and lords of the Narrow Sea who'd grown rich under Robert, but now loathed Cersei's tyranny. Ned watched them from the battlements, wind curling through his hair. He was not a king, he didn't want to be, but he had become something rarer, a man too dangerous to kill and too honest to ignore. Arya trained daily, her bruises blooming, like war paint. She listened less to the Red Woman now, and more to the sounds of blades clashing. She kept a knife under her pillow and prayed to the old gods, not for peace, but for vengeance. One night, as the storm broke over the sea, Stannis summoned Ned to the war room. A massive painted table lay before them, the map of Westeros. "We sail at dawn," he said. "You'll land near Blackwater. Lead the charge. The North follows you more than me." Ned stared at the map, at the city where all this began. "Cersei will fight with fire," he said. Stannis nodded. "Then we drown it with truth." And so, before the sun rose, the war for the Iron Throne truly began, not just over bloodlines or banners, but over the lie that made a bastard king. The fleet pushed into the sea like blades unsheathed. The storm had passed, but war was just beginning. The morning King's Landing woke to war. It wasn't with fanfare or royal proclamations. It was with sails on the horizon and fear in the streets. Dozens of ships, their prows shaped like burning hearts and wolves, surged through the early mist. Dragonstone's fleet had arrived. From the battlements, Cersei watched with wine-stained lips and a heart full of rage. "Stannis thinks himself a king," she spat, "but he'll die like a rebel." Joffrey stood beside her in armor too, polished to be real, barking orders he didn't understand. "We'll burn them all with wildfire," he shouted. "The traitors will scream." But even pyromancer Hallyne trembled at the thought of so much flame so close to the city's heart. Sansa sat alone in her chambers, hands clasped, praying to gods she barely believed in. Not for herself, but for Arya, for her father, somewhere. Beyond the city walls, she knew her family was coming, and the thought terrified her more than comforted her, because no one came to King's Landing without bleeding for it. Outside the gates, Ned Stark led the vanguard, armored in grey and ice, his sword ice now reforged for battle, heavy with vengeance. The North rode beside him, Karstarks on black stallions, Umbers roaring battle songs, and even a small detachment of the Night's Watch, who had come south to repay old debts. Beside Ned rode Sir Davos Seaworth, the smuggler-turned-knight. "We can still offer them terms," Davos said. "End this before it becomes fire and corpses." "They had their chance," Ned muttered. "They chose to keep the lie. Now, they'll taste what truth feels like." The assault began before noon. Stannis' fleet battered the harbour with flaming bolts and ballistae. The gold cloaks scrambled, their lines breaking under the weight of fear. Sir Barristan Selmy, forced from his position but not his honour, led a contingent of loyalists within the city, opening the southern gate before the Lannisters could seal it. The North poured in like a cold flood. Street by street they fought. Civilians screamed. Smoke choked the sky. Noble houses bolted their doors and prayed to every god that this war would pass them by. But King's Landing was not built to escape truth. It had to choke on it. In the Red Keep, Cersei descended into madness. "If they reach the gates," she told her handmaid, "I'll slit Joffrey's throat myself before I let them parade him through the streets." Tyrion, caught between blood and politics, made his move. He found Sansa and told her quietly, "Stay hidden. When the city falls, and it will fall, say nothing, cry, scream, beg, but survive." In the Lower Bailey, Arya fought her own war. Armed with a stolen blade and hate, she moved like shadow. She saw Lannister guards fleeing. She saw smoke swallowing the city. And then she saw him, Sandor Clegane, the Hound, dragging a screaming Joffrey toward the stables. He turned and saw her. "You again," he muttered. Arya raised her blade, but the Hound didn't attack. He shoved Joffrey forward. "Take him, or kill him. Makes no difference to me. I'm done with lions." Joffrey whimpered on the ground, eyes wide, lips quivering. Arya walked forward, slowly, deliberately. "You killed my friends," she whispered. "You killed my father's name." Joffrey sobbed. I didn't mean my mother." But before she could finish her sentence, Ned arrived, covered in blood, smoke, and fury. He froze at the sight of his daughter standing over the boy king with a blade. "Arya," he said softly. She didn't drop the dagger, but she stepped back. Ned looked down at the boy who'd sentenced him to die, and then he did what no one expected. He spared him. "Put him in chains," Ned said to the Stark men. "Let the realm decide what happens next." The battle was nearly over. Cersei had fled into the inner chambers of Maegor's holdfast, but there would be no wildfire, no last screams from her orphans. The gates had fallen, the Iron Throne was taken, and for the first time since Robert's rebellion, truth sat heavier than gold in the capital. The smoke hadn't yet cleared from King's Landing when the reckoning began. The war might have ended with swords lowered and the Iron Throne cold under torchlight, but victory, real victory, was far from certain. The Red Keep stood like a wounded beast. Its halls were blackened by fire, the scent of blood soaked into its stones, and on the throne, for the first time in what felt like an age, no one sat. Not a lion, not a usurper, not even a would-be king. Only silence and steel. Eddard Stark stood before it again, but not as a prisoner. This time he stood as the man who had broken the lie. Around him were men and women who had fought for that truth, and now looked to him for what came next. But truth was a crown with thorns. That evening, the surviving lords of Westeros gathered in the scorched Great Hall. Stannis Baratheon entered. First, robed in black and red, his jaw clenched with righteous fury, his banner waved behind him, a stag aflame. Then came Robb Stark, youthful and tall, flanked by the Greatjon and bannermen of the North. His face had aged 10 years in one campaign. He walked like a man who'd seen too much to ever be a boy again. Renly did not come. His army had not arrived. The message from Storm's End was clear. We do not recognize Stannis Baratheon. Cersei was nowhere to be found. Disguised in rags, she had vanished through the city's tunnels the night the gate fell. Some said she was dead. Others said she fled to Casterly Rock. Ned suspected she had not fled far. Venom like hers doesn't evaporate. It coils, waits, and strikes when forgotten. Joffrey sat in chains beneath the throne, head bowed, stripped of crown and title. His face was bruised, but it wasn't pain that made him tremble. It was the weight of silence, of shame. For the first time in his life, no one bowed, no one obeyed, no one feared him. Stannis' voice thundered through the hall. By rights of blood, by the laws of gods and men, the Iron Throne belongs to me. No one challenged him, not even Ned. But the room was not convinced, not fully, not yet. Lord Tully stood. And what of the North? What of the Riverlands who bled to bring down the false king? A murmur swept through the lords. Old allegiances had burned in the fire of war. Now new lines had to be drawn. Robb rose, eyes locked with his father's. The North will never kneel again. We fought not for a crown, but for honor, for truth. We came south to end the lie, not to prop up another. A gasp moved through the lords like wind. Someone shouted, "King in the North!" Ned stepped forward. "If the North secedes," Stannis said tightly, "the realm fractures again. I cannot allow it." Ned met his eyes, calm but unyielding. "Then do what the Lannisters couldn't. Cut me down for speaking the truth." Stannis hesitated, his knuckles whitened, but he did not draw. "I will not kneel," Robb said again, louder now, but then Ned turned, not to Stannis, not to Robb, but to the throne itself. No man should sit on that chair until this realm remembers what truth is. The room froze, Ned's voice softened. "For years we let lies rule us. Bastards were made kings. Kings became beasts. Brothers betrayed brothers. And all for what? A throne that cuts the one who claims it." Silence. Then from Davos. "Then, who rules, Lord Stark?" Ned looked around at all the bleeding banners, the shattered houses, the young and the old, the wolves and the stags. "We rebuild. We form a council of the great houses. Let no one man rule, but all of Westeros speak as one." Stannis looked ready to explode, but he didn't. Melisandre, watching from the shadows, narrowed her eyes. "This realm does not need fire or shadow," Ned said, eyes flicking to her. "It needs peace and justice, and it needs time to remember what mercy feels like." The Iron Throne remained empty. Joffrey would stand trial, the truth of his bloodline confirmed, his mother hunted. The Lannister name, for the first time in a generation, dimmed under disgrace. Sansa was found, weeping when she saw her father. She clung to him, as if afraid he might vanish again. Arya, harder now, stood beside them but said little. She had seen too much. She understood that peace was fragile, and vengeance never slept for long. And so the wolf who once whispered in a lion's den had roared, and the realm had heard. But peace is never the end of a story. It's only the eye of the storm. King's Landing, once a pit of scheming courtiers, and whispered betrayals, now moved under the weight of silence. Not peace. Peace never truly came to Westeros, but a hush born from exhaustion, grief, and the flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, the worst was over. The Iron Throne sat untouched, in the great hall, its blades gleaming under dust and dawn. Eddard Stark had declared it cursed, a relic of Aegon's conquest that brought more blood than order, and now it stood empty, a throne no man dared sit upon. Not yet. In its place, a great council was formed. Stannis Baratheon, stone-faced and reluctant, agreed to serve not as king, but as Lord Regent, the sword arm of law, not the crown of rule. Davos Seaworth was named Hand, and some said he was the only one with a true heart for the job. Eddard Stark refused any titles. He returned to the Tower of the Hand for a short time, only to oversee the trials and investigations. Once justice began to take root, he planned to leave. "I was never made for cities or crowns," he told his daughters. "The North is my blood." And Robb? Robb was crowned king in the north at River Run by torchlight before a crowd of roaring bannermen. But it was a quieter coronation than most, one born of duty, not celebration. He was young, scarred, and far too old inside. War had stolen his boyhood, and kingship would only rob what little remained. The trial of Joffrey Baratheon became the spectacle of a generation. Lords travelled from across the realm to witness it. The High Septon was restored to power, this time without Lannister gold in his robes, and presided with Ned at his side. Maesters confirmed the incest. Littlefinger's treachery was exposed. Pycelle tried to defend the lie, but even his voice broke when faced with the truth. Joffrey, under oath and stripped of power, broke on the second day. "They told me I was king." he screamed. "They told me I was chosen. What was I supposed to do?" Cersei was never found. Rumors claimed she'd fled to Essos, perhaps Bravos. Some believed she still whispered commands from the shadows, pulling strings from across the sea. Others thought she was already dead, swallowed by her own house of cards. Sansa remained in King's Landing for a time, learning the truth of power, not just how it was taken, but how it was held. She asked to return north, but Ned refused. "Not yet," he said. "You've seen their games. Now learn how to end them." Arya left quietly, without telling even her sister. One night she simply vanished, leaving behind only a small blade, and a single line scratched into the wood. "I have names." Varys remained as silent and smooth as ever. He worked with the new council, whispering warnings of threats across the sea. "Targaryens still breathe," he said, "and where dragons breathe, fire follows." Tyrion was named Master of Coin, again, this time under protest, though few knew whether he hated the job or just missed wine. He served under Ned's counsel, and surprisingly the two found a quiet, mutual respect. Two men who had lost too. Much to ever laugh about politics, the Iron Bank of Bravos sent letters. The Dothraki remained distant. Dorne declared neutrality, licking old wounds and remembering Oberyn's rage. The Night's Watch sent ravens about strange things stirring in the far north, but most ignored it. Winter had not yet arrived. Ned finally prepared to return to Winterfell. He stood on the docks beside Arya's empty berth, looking out at the sea with tired eyes. "She's hunting ghosts," he said. "She's becoming one," Davos replied. Ned nodded. "Let's hope she doesn't lose her soul along the way." As the ship sailed north, Robb at his side, Ned Stark felt no triumph, no joy, only relief. And a quiet sadness that justice had taken such a terrible toll. They passed the burned villages, the broken fields, the graves with no names. That was the true cost of truth. But in his hand he held a letter, a new decree, sealed with the sigils of the Great Council. Henceforth, no monarch shall rule alone. The 7 kingdoms shall be governed by a council of lords, chosen by merit, not blood. The Iron Throne shall remain a symbol, but no longer a seat. For the first time in centuries, no one ruled Westeros from fear, and that perhaps was the real victory. Not banners, not thrones, but choice.